Thank you, Chair. This committee is reviewing a list of contracts given as part of the Indigenous Procurement Program. Some of these companies do seem to follow the GC Strategies model. That is, they are very small firms based in private homes in Ottawa, not on reserves, but in Ottawa, who advertise a specialty in government contracts management. In other words, they're in the business of simply getting contracts and subcontracting. Do you think that the government should be contracting out to firms who use the GC Strategies model?
That brings us back to the discussion that we had some months ago. And as you know, very important measures have been put in place since that time, including...
I've got 5 minutes, and you know you're not answering the question. Do you think that government should be contracting out to firms who use who use the GC Strategies model? I'm not talking about ArriveCan, I'm talking about the model, where a company just receives contracts and subcontracts without actually working on the project. Do you think that the government should contract to companies who use this model?
Well, I think the ArriveCan model and the GC Strategies model has been well discussed and much investigated by all sorts of groups and committees and organizations.
And
we
the
have
RCMP.
learned important lessons. Those lessons have been
I'll
shared.
just give you one more chance to answer the question. It's a yes or no question. The record will show whether you answered it or not. Do you think that the Government of Canada should contract to companies who simply receive contracts and subcontract? Should the government contract to companies who use this model?
Well, I've just answered the important fact, as you point out, that so-called
Yes or
model,
no?
which you just described, is a model that has been heavily criticized by the Auditor General and other groups, including this particular committee. And obviously, those lessons have been
Yes or no?
well understood, and many of those recommendations have already been implemented over the last
Okay, but
few years.
the question still hasn't been answered, but I have to move on. There's a particular problem here if the recipients of all or most of those subcontracts are non-Indigenous. If you have a small, officially Indigenous firm that is simply acting as a broker between the federal government and non-Indigenous business, then they're masking the fact that actually Indigenous peoples, Indigenous businesses are not getting the final business at the end of the day. Is there an expectation or a requirement that some percentage of subcontracts also go to Indigenous firms?
Well, that's exactly what we need to do. We need to make sure that Indigenous businesses have access to the procurement opportunity that other Canadians also have. And that's why...
Right, at the subcontracting level as well?
Not only do we have a target of 5%, but we're moving towards that target, and in some of the departments we have exceeded that target.
Okay, sorry, Minister, it's a specific question. I'd like you to answer it. Is there an expectation at the subcontracting level that some percentage, when a contract goes to an Indigenous business that's acting primarily as a broker, is there an expectation that a certain percentage of the subcontracts go to Indigenous businesses?
There are rules and regulations and expectations and targets.
Okay, so what's that percentage then?
Indigenous businesses have their fair share of procurement
what is the percentage required at the subcontract
Look
level?
at him already smirking.
So as you note, and as you will know, I suppose the target is 5% of Indigenous businesses having access to procurement contracts. That's a minimum. This is not the
Minister, you're not answering the question. The question is about subcontracts. So if a contract goes to an Indigenous business as part of that 5%, and that Indigenous business then subcontracts to someone else, what percentage of those subcontracts should be Indigenous? Because if 100% of those subcontracts are non-Indigenous, maybe there's a problem there. So of that 5%, for the subcontracts, what percentage must, if any, must be Indigenous?
So that is exactly one of the important things that the department needs to do in collaboration with other departments, because PSPC is not the only department. So
just the number, what percentage?
Levels,
just the percentage.
Including not only
this guy can't answer a bloody
job,
question.
But who owns the company, the impact in the communities.
What's
where
because
those
the answer is zero.
Minister, simple question. I'm running out of time. What percentage?
Well, I'm just trying to explain the context.
I'm not looking for an explanation. I'm looking for a number.
And if you like,
and I'm just going to say,
further,
Minister, the committee ordered information on subcontracts, and almost none were provided. The information we got from the vast majority of departments is that they're not even tracking. They're not even tracking on subcontracts. A final question. There are over 600 Indigenous nations in this country. Do you think it would be a problem if a single company were getting, say, more than 5% of the total amount allocated for Indigenous procurement?
Brief answer, please, Minister. Very brief.
So there are about 600 communities in Canada, Indigenous communities, about 70 Indigenous First Nations, and we work with all of them
He
to make
didn't
sure that
ask
they have
you
access
to
to the proper
repeat his
services
question.
and the proper procurement opportunities.
Chair, the minister
That
didn't answer
wasn't-
the question,
that
so I
wasn't,
wonder if it
yeah,
could
an
be posed
answer.
to him again. Maybe there was a
Perhaps
problem
he
in
can-
transportation.
We are at a time, perhaps you can get back to us with a real answer in writing, Minister.
If
Yeah,
more
a
is,
real
is,
answer.
is needed, we'll provide more.
What would be too much for a single
Mr.
company?
Genuis, I'm afraid we have to move on because we do have other ministers waiting. Mr. Sousa for